Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Romano. I'm the graduate intern of the Disability Resource Center, and welcome to our Thrive conversation. Today, we have Dr. Brooks, Senator Gary Winfield, and Carl Jacobson. And today, we are talking about community policing and the wellness and well-being surrounding it. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hello.
So, as we get into this conversation, we will focus on what we can do to promote this for students, as well as push this initiative forward so we can focus on the wellness and well-being of what's happening in our communities, as well as our university and colleges around surrounding this topic. So our first question is, what is community policing and what is the goal of community policing?
Did you want to go in a certain order?
You can start.
Okay. So I'm going to speak from experience with the New Haven Police Department. To us, community policing is a mindset. It's to empower the community and work closely with the community. The police must serve the community, and the police also need to know their community. So there's a couple concepts. If you look back, and I recently took a master's course on community policing. You have three different models, right? You have you have a community police unit where it's just 2 or 3 people assigned to community police issues. Then you have where you have a boss, a supervisor in each section of the city, which we have. We have district managers in our sections of our city. Then you have where you assign the officers to the specific sections, and New Haven does that. So what we do is we have a district manager who's assigned to a specific group of officers, and we try to leave those officers in that area for as long as possible until they get promoted. And you'll see that you could, like me, I started in the Hill, so I always talk about the Hill. I know more people in the Hill, and it's about being out there. And it doesn't necessarily have to be walking beats, but when I started in New Haven, it was a walking beat, and I think a walking beat is a good thing to kind of force the cops to be more interactive with the community. But the bottom line is we put the officers in that area. We keep them in that area. We give them all cell phones. The theory is they give their cell phone numbers out to people. So even when they're on or off, they can talk to members of the community, and they're specific to that community. So that begins to build trust between officers and community members. Now, does that work perfectly here? I would say no. But that's the goals we're looking for. And now we want, as community policing, we're problem solving. We're helping people with other things besides crime, besides reducing crime. And we get to a place where we need less police. And I think a few years ago we got there. There was less violent crime. There was less need for police all over the neighborhood. And police are able to just solve problems and not react to violent crime or other crimes. So as in terms of what we want to do, that's what I would like to see us at again in New Haven, and it doesn't mean, it's very personnel intensive to have walking beats, right? Because you have 2 people just walking in a smaller area. But I think the reward to that is so much more important because they get to know the people in the area. The people begin to trust them. They get a form of police legitimacy. And procedural justice sets in, which is when the people in a neighborhood feel the police are just and they're good people trying to do good things, they actually adhere to the law better. So that's the vision I'd like to see. And by all means, I'm not saying we get it right in New Haven, but I think we do it a lot better than other places. But a long way to go. But I would say it's a mindset, and it has to be every officer, and it has to be the way we have it set up is supervising a district manager in that area that knows more people than everyone else, and then officers are specifically assigned to that area. And if they can, yes, walking beats. Any other way that we get them out of the cars and have interaction with the community. But then also we should be, as police, lifting up the community to the point where they need less police and they're policing themselves. That's the best case scenario.
Thank you for sharing. Senator Gary Winfield, do you have anything to add?
I think I think he did an extensive conversation on what community policing is, and I largely agree. I think for the conversation we're having, some things to remember is that even in the same entity, community policing from time to time can change because of what he was talking about with the mindset. So I sit in New Haven, where in my neighborhood I've seen excellent. Um, examples of community policing and bad examples of community policing. I've told the story, and I'm sure Officer Jacobs probably heard me say this at one point, that one time I was doing my lawn. I'm well known in the community. There's a cop car sitting right at my home, and I keep looking at the cop car like, are you guys even going to recognize me? And I went up to them at one point, and they still didn't recognize me. And yet there are times when we've had officers who are deeply connected to the community. They know the people in the community. And so community policing, whatever the model is, depends on, and it also depends on not just the notion that we're going to do community policing, but the notion that it's actually valuable. And that comes down from the top. And depending on who's at the top and how valuable it is, and what they see as important to policing, is going to have something to do with whether or not community policing actually works in the communities we're talking about.
Thank you for sharing. I also want to note we have Chaz from Ice the Beef New Haven has joined us in this meeting as well. Hello, Chaz.
How you doing, gentlemen?
Doing good.
Yes.
So if you want to add on to that, you could.
Yes, so I believe we're stuck question one, what is community policing and what is its goal?
Yes.
So I can talk from the neighborhood's perspective of community policing. So for when I was a youth, community policing to me is supposed to be our officers in our neighborhoods, connecting with our neighborhoods, getting to know the residents in the neighborhoods. We get to know them. When I was a youth, we knew who the officers were that walked beats and worked the neighborhood. We also knew which officers were cool and who we did not mess with. And then you would have one officer who everybody loved that officer, and you see him, you have a conversation, you get a moment to just hang out with him a little bit. And anytime you saw him, they'd call you by name and, hey, Chaz, what you doing? It's getting dark. Why you not inside? Stuff like that. And then you would automatically listen to that officer because he built a relationship with you. I think a major point of community policing is building a relationship with the residents in that neighborhood or in that community. All schools are doing what's called restorative practices, which the teachers are building relationships. Youth programs are doing the same thing. We build relationships. And so the standpoint of community policing for me is that getting into the neighborhoods and building relationships with the residents in the neighborhood, and then that makes it more likely for them to be able to have a conversation with you when they're in trouble, or just to have a basic conversation when they're walking by your car or you're walking by them. There were instances as a youth where you knew cops who you just didn't mess with. We would name them. One name was RoboCop, and in the Hill area, and you knew if you seen RoboCop, you had to run. It was any conversation happening, whether you did something or not. Your internal fight or flight was run. And that just because it was his overall perception of how he carried himself. I'm not saying he was a bad officer. I'm just saying, as a youth perspective of the officer was, as soon as you hear him coming, it was time to leave. But then you had other officers like Hunter and a couple other people, in different neighborhoods who you just, as soon as you see them, you walk up to them and have that conversation just like a normal person in the neighborhood. So I think it's really important to having the point of community policing and the goal is to build relationships with the individuals you are serving in that neighborhood. And that can be just going up and having a conversation. How you doing? I'm officer so-and-so. And how you guys doing today? And just creating any kind of basic, conversation to show that I am an officer, but I'm also a human being. And when you take that, we see officers in our neighborhood, you'll have them on this high echelon, right? And then when they start talking to you and you realize, wait, they're just a regular person. that brings them off of that pedestal that we have in our mindset of the sense of police officers, and now it brings them down to this is just a regular person I could talk to. And when you meet those kind of officers, I think they get more done because you're more persistent to go and find that officer or give them information or things of that nature because you know them, you feel comfortable with them. So I think building relationships is really the main importance of community policing in our neighborhoods.
Good morning. Is there anything that you believe that community policing can do to help improve the well-being of the citizens in that community?
So, did you want me to start?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. I like to talk, so I don't want to talk too much, guys. But I will say one thing, and I saw this question and I related it to our Project Longevity program. What we do with Project Longevity is we identify the high-risk youth and adults in our community who are likely to be shot or do the shooting. And then instead of just trying to put cases on them or arrest them or do whatever, we talk to them. And we do it through a thing called a call-in, where we call them all in and we talk about when we bring social service networks in to help get them jobs, identifications, whatever they need, housing. And we say, if you continue violent behavior, we're going to come after you. But if not, we're here to help you with anything. You need an ID, you need a Walmart card, you need food, you need diapers, whatever you need. And I think that method of policing, where we're coming to you and we're asking you to make a change, and this is the police and members of the community doing this. And I think now, when I relate that back to mental health, right, you have to look at where New Haven was from 2003 to 2011. New Haven averaged 138 non-fatal shootings. So 138 people were shot and 21 people were murdered every year. From 2012, when we started to talk to people and offer services instead of just arrest, until today, we average, well, it's up now, we're a little higher this year, but we average 65 non-fatal shootings and 11 homicides. We cut everything in half. Now, that's mental health and physical health of the community. By doing these, being kind to people, offering them services, and warning them, hey, but if you don't stop, we're coming after you. We know who you are. We were able to cut our violent crime in half. Now, that's not just people actually physically shot or killed. That's the people who witnessed this, who have massive trauma from that, right? I think where we fall short as a community, as a city, is there's so many people affected by these shootings. And it's not just the shooter and the victim, right? You have trauma in these kids' lives that have just, Chaz and I dealt with a situation yesterday where we did a narcotics raid on a kid's house, and that's trauma. You know what I mean? We have trauma that we need to get away from. And by limiting these shootings and reaching out, we can limit the number of people involved in trauma. Just the atmosphere that sometimes when you go into a neighborhood and you're wearing a uniform, that's trauma. We need to eliminate that by community policing. And they don't look at me as as an officer. They look at me as, hey, that's Carl the cop. I know that guy. He walks my neighborhood. I built relationships in the Hill. To this day, there's people who call me on Christmas and Thanksgiving, and that's the type of stuff we need to do. And that increases health all over the community, because the police traditionally have created harm. And I'm going to say it. We've created harm. Now, we didn't do it on purpose. We were just doing what we thought was right to stop violence or whatever. My perfect example is there's a murder in a community, and we just locked that community down. We got cops in every corner. The guy going to work at 7 a.m. with the unregistered car gets stopped, 0 tolerance. We tow his car. How does that help? But these are the things we did. Those getting away from those practices increases the community's health. And I would say that's community policing, increasing the community's health.
I would totally add to that. Community policing builds wellness for a community. It is so important. When you have community police officers who are nice or able to talk to when you do have saying good morning and good morning back to you, or even stop for a second. Some kids are throwing a football and you walk by and you stop for a second. I've seen this many times, and I'll throw a couple, throws with the kids and then have a little conversation and go on about their business. Those things build great wellness in the communities because when we have shootings and we have these things, you're scared to tell someone. You're scared to call the police department, but when you feel like you have someone you can call and he understands you, you talk to him, you're comfortable with him, you'll give that call and give that information, which could save more lives if we as a community are able to give this information because all communities in the inner city have this big thing about snitching. And I think we misconstrue what snitching is. We any kind of telling or telling anyone to automatically snitching when that's really not the case. I often have to explain to youth that the difference between being a snitch, what they call it, or just telling something that can help you or everyone else in the community is different. If you did the crime with the person and you told them, that's more classified as snitching to inner city youth and residents. But if you saw a murder happen on your street or something happen and you happen to see it and you don't call, now this person is still loose with his gun in the neighborhood, which is detrimental to all of us. So being able to feel like internally that I can talk to Officer Johnson because he's cool and I have information that I don't want to indulge anybody, but I know I can tell Officer Johnson because he's cool and he'll make sure I'm safe and he'll get right on whatever the situation that it may be. So even if kids are having beef or a problem with another kid in the neighborhood or a neighborhood across town, if you felt like you had an officer or even like ourselves with Ice the Beef, we work with youth like that all the time who have an issue and they're scared to call the cops, they're scared to do this and that. And then we are the mid-ground people to say, let's get to these youth parents, try to have this conversation. We do our own kind of community policing. But if you have an officer in a neighborhood who's cool like that, you're able to tell that officer. I know when I grew up in the Ashby projects, we had a couple cool officers and something happened as kids. You seen it, you wouldn't call 911, but when you see Officer Johnson, you can just tell Officer Johnson, this is what's happening around the corner at Miss Mary's house. She got beat up 3 nights in a row. And, nobody's saying anything, but I'm comfortable with Officer Johnson. He's cool with us. So I can tell him information. So community policing really, really builds wellness for neighborhoods and communities when you have cops who are really doing what I said before, like are building relationships in the neighborhood. Once you build those relationships and we feel like you're cool and somebody I can talk to and you're just a normal human being, then I'm able to tell you information that you may need that may solve crimes, that may save the rest of the neighborhood or New Haven based on these things, because we all get affected by these murders and shootings and thefts and things of that nature.
And if I might, I think that I agree with all of that, but I want to be a little bit careful because it seems like we are saying that if a crime happens and connecting that to the well-being. And I just want to say that there's a history both nationally and even in this city of relationships between certain communities and police. And you don't have to be involved in crime to have a certain level of stress, a traumatic response to policing. And so when you have police that function in a different way, even those who have actually no real connection to what we're talking about, is the way that they respond. I've seen people when police are in the neighborhood who are very careful about watching what the police are doing because they don't know what the interaction between themselves and the police are going to be. And these aren't people who've done anything at all, right? So given Officer Jacobs' scenario where, there's a crime, they lock down the neighborhood, and a guy who has a car that's not registered, even a person who has a car that's registered in certain communities, in certain neighborhoods, is still going to be wary of those police. And so if the relationship between the community and the police changes, whether you're involved in crime, connected to crime, or completely disconnected from crime, it is going to have an impact. And we know that more recently than should have been, because if you ask people in certain communities, they could have told you that there's a thing called community level trauma, and policing adds to that because of the historic way that it's been. has nothing to do with the fact that we've always had some good officers and some officers who don't do everything they're supposed to do. But community policing, in the way that we're talking about it here, helps to alleviate some of the psychological impact of what policing has been.
And I can go along with that. For myself, born in the inner city, I totally had an innate ability, or mechanism that automatically, once you see cops or you see a cop car, it's automatically, you're in heightened sense. And even to this day, that trauma is still prevalent in most African Americans and minorities in inner cities. Even if you have a great job and you're doing the right thing, or you're a senator, you may get in the car and drive, and a cop get behind you, or you see a cop, you still get to, for a moment, you got to realize, well, I'm fine. I'm doing that wrong. But it's just internal. I caught myself the other day. It's internal. So that's that building relationships also in the neighborhoods and getting that look at what an officer is in your community, and being able to somehow figure out that might be a major thing to do. How do we figure out how to make the officers, the blue, not feel like it's a scary thing, like that's something that is just, with PTSD, you're born into PTSD in our neighborhoods. You're also born with this automatic feeling of police being bad and distrust. And that may come from living in your household. It may come from many things, or even watching TV. It could be coming from many things. But if we can figure out a way to build those relationships and somehow make the officers seem like normal residents. I went to an event last year who we helped sponsor, and the officers in New Orleans did a big event, gave out food and the bouncy house and music, and all the residents came out hanging out, just talking with the cops, and they were on the grill and cooking, and you got to see them differently. Things like that really matter in our neighborhoods. Right now it's COVID, it's hard to do a lot of those, but I think we need to do more things like that where we just show that these guys are regular people.
Thank you for sharing a lot of important points that, we have hit upon about wellness and well-being and trauma. Trauma is a big thing that we are starting to see within a lot of our communities with the current Black Lives Matter movement and all these different movements going on about policing as a whole. So to go along with the next question is, what types of training are police officers being surrounded with behind mental health and well-being, and what can community members do in their community to help support mental health and well-being?
So I'll start. We do have a lot of different, but I know the city of New Haven is looking at mental health response, crisis response without police, and I think that's a great idea. We're not against that. We're for that. But we do have like crisis management training. There's several things in the academy to do with that type of activity. But I think just the person showing up in uniform with a gun is traumatic to the mental health person having the mental health issue. And I think we have to get away from police responding to certain types of those Representative Winfield, I forget what it's called. What's the city? I forget what the city's proposing, like a cahoots type thing, right? There's one in Portland, but it's like basically crisis response with a nurse practitioner, maybe even a fireman and somebody else to help that person through the crisis problem they're having. Police can't do it all. I really think this is something that is better suited for that type of response. If for instance that gets raised to a different level and they need the police, they can always call the police. We just had a situation in Fairhaven where a guy, Wanda Droffes from the Mental Health Institute, showed up and was talking to a guy. He ran in a room, shut the door, said he had a gun. We responded. We talked to him with negotiators and Wanda. And that's the thing, too. Police used to have this attitude like, hey, it's our scene now. We're taking over. And we don't want to have that attitude anymore. We want other professionals involved that can help, make the situation better. And I just wanted to add, when you saw this question about mental health and well-being, I also thought about the police officers,
Mm,
because
mm,
messed up police officers
mm.
produce messed up situations, right? And I want to say to Representative Winfield that um, although I don't like every part of your police accountability bill, I love those parts where you say we need mental health testing, we need steroid testing. Oh my God, listen, you were right on with that. We need that. Um, and we need to show it as an administration that, guys, this is here for you. And that's what we're saying to them now. Like, this isn't because the people hate you, it's because it's the right thing to do. And if you guys are messed up, you can't help these messed up situations, and you only get more messed up, you know. So sir, I definitely say thank you for that. That's the sections of that bill that are just really good for us. And there's other ones too that are really good for us too. But I just wanted to say that to you, because to add that in, put the mental health of the police in there too, because steroids testing is mental health too. You know, there's a lot of good things in there, and I appreciate that. But back to the mental health of the community. I mean, we have to do better as police department, but we also, as a society, have to do better and stop dumping everything into the police category. Well, who's going to take care of illegal dumping? Police. Who's going to take care of that boarded up house? Police. Who's going to take care of that mental health issue? Police. Who's going to take that child away from their family? DCF's going to go in there, but who's DCF going to call? The police. And we just get stuck in these situations over and over. So I would say to you that, yes, there's terrible negative things that the police have done in the past. And, you know, me and Stacy Spell do a class to Academy people where we show African-American males being hung, and they have handcuffs on. And we say to the cops, they have handcuffs on because the police had a part in that years ago, you know? So you have to understand that before you can police certain sections of the community. So you understand, and you have that. That's why they don't like you. It's not you personally. Stop. It's the uniform and the badge. So if you go in there and you put out the right attitude and you're kind and you're trying to help them and you show that, then they're going to react better to you. And my goal as a police officer for 23 years is to leave a situation better than when I got there, right? Because people call us at the worst of the worst. And it comes down to it. Sometimes we can't handle it. So as an administrator, I want to get better at helping the community pick what they need for these certain situations, especially the mental health situations, and then getting the police out of some, but also telling the police, hey guys, this is why people dislike you. You can change that. You have a voice in changing that through community policing, which is perfect for this forum. But I just want to say that. Thank you.
If I may jump in there, okay, you can go ahead,
Okay.
Gary. You go ahead, Gary.
I was just gonna, yeah, okay. I was just gonna say that, look, we have to. These conversations have to be conversations that we haven't had. They have to be straightforward. They have to be honest, right? So I've done police accountability not just this year. I did a bill last year, and I did a bill in 2015, and I've done other versions of it prior to that. And the thing that I have been trying to get across is, one, I don't hate police. I have police in my family, right? But I do think the relationship between police in the community, between communities and policing in general, has to change. Just because we've done something a certain way doesn't mean that we did it right, and doesn't mean we should continue to do it. And so, every time that I've done one of these bills, what I've heard from the police is people keep putting on us tasks that we should not have. And so part of, if you go into the 2015, 19, and 20 bill, part of what you will see inside of those bills are efforts to deal with that, which comes from the police. We did a bill last year in 2019, and what I recognized was that one of the things that is not being talked about is mental health. And we see a lot of the interactions where they go wrong. There's a mental health component either for the officer or the person who's being acted upon. And we need to get to a point where we understand it. So we have a task force that part of their task is to go out and do these forums, which you may have seen. And what they've discovered in every forum wasn't a surprise to me, but was actually a surprise to some people involved in the task force, is that people keep saying there's a mental health thing going on here, right? And so police are not equipped historically to deal with that. They haven't been trained deeply enough, and that's a reality. And so it's not that you don't want or do want police; it's that they're not equipped. We have to be efficient in what we're doing, and it's not efficient to put people on the scene to deal with situations they just aren't equipped to deal with. And so, in the state of Connecticut, and hopefully more so across the country, you will begin to see efforts to make sure that we are actually putting the correct resources to the correct issues. And I think that's important, because otherwise, what you're going to have are situations that resolve themselves in such a way that never should have resolved themselves. You have instances where people, unfortunately, will find themselves when a mental health expert could have availed them of resources at the wrong end of a gun. We need to think deeply about this. And I, again, which I've been doing for years, I invite the police again to give us the recommendations. Don't wait for us to come up with what we think. Give us the recommendations on how you think we can help you to do those things that I think they've been asking for a number of years.
So if I can't, go ahead, Chief. Good?
Okay. No, I was just agreeing with them. Thank you, sir.
So a couple points. I want to jump back to the mental health a little bit. Question. I think a big stigma, stigma in our neighborhoods is that word, those words, mental health. There's so many departments jumble into that word, right? And those words. And when you're living in the inner city and you see a violence, or you have you walk outside and you see someone put candles out for someone that was shot, this is trauma just seeing those. It's trauma hearing the gunshots. I think a lot of thing is when you hear the words mental health, you're like, well, I'm not mental, so I'm not going to go get the help. I'm not going to mental health. If we change that, and I've been saying this for a while this year, if we can figure out a new term for that department, maybe self-care or family health or something more, nicer in terminology. Because when you're in the inner city, I can tell you straight up, when you hear mental health, you're like, well, I'm not mental, I'm not going there. And mental health could be so many other departments that can help you, but like just getting therapy or whatever, but it's in mental health. So you start to feel like, well, I'm not crazy, okay, we have normalized someone getting shot. That is just a normal thing that happens. But you're traumatized. Whether you can get through it and cope with it, whatever, you have trauma. And I believe if you had another term on like family services or something like that, you may be more, you might reach out to them. But when you hear mental health, you start to think that I got to be crazy to go there. And then you don't even really understand that there's so many other departments that work inside of mental health that you can get help, but you have to call the mental health services, so we can find a new word, a new way to change that term or those departments and label them something differently. I think more people in the inner city would be acceptable to come there. But I love the way Chief had talked about also the police officers. And we tend to forget that the police officers are human, and they may have had trauma in their lives, or they on the job, and then we tend to forget that they're human beings too. So they also seeing a dead body. I don't care who you are, that can cause traumatic experience, whether you're a police officer or not. And I don't think, even though it happens or you see it often or you've seen it over your 20, 30 years, I don't think you ever get used to it. I think it still causes some sense of trauma to the officer. So it's a good point right there to make that, that we make sure that our officers are getting therapy or family services rather than mental health services, getting family services or self-care on the job, because they're taking that trauma home to their family also. And now their family may also have trauma from what he's seen or she's seen on the job. So really focusing also on our police officers and making sure that they have proper care on the job. And I think it's very important that we make sure that, I really applaud Jacobson and Reyes. I don't know about any other chiefs, but I know about ours in this city. And I can see they really care about our city and they try to help our city. And I've had many conversations with them and seen it for myself. But when you have a city like ours, who our top brass is trying to help, but then you look at the Mount Arbery case, that top brass is not trying to help over there. We go to Breonna Taylor case, you got guys getting off. you know, at the higher level. So when you have the top brass in your city really caring about community policing, really caring about the neighborhoods, really caring about self-care, it's a trickle down effect to the officers. Because if your top don't care, why should your officers care? So when you have like our city, when you have top brass who care about the neighborhoods, that trickles down to the. It may take a long time to make the change happen, but eventually, if they stick to their guns and making this change happen in the officers, it will eventually happen. The bad apples will go, and you keep all the good apples because you stay strong on how you want the job to be done in your city. So it's very important that we have top brass that understand what's going on in the neighborhoods, the people living in the neighborhood, and what community policing should be. So I really applaud Chief Jacobs and Reyes for just having understanding and to stick to their guns on community policing in their neighborhoods. Of course, everything can be done better. Of course, nothing's a quick fix, and that's just what it is. And we continue as a community to keep fighting for that. But as long as our top brass are agreeing or at least trying to make the change, major thing happens. Because we can go to some southern cities and they're not trying to hear nothing you're talking about. They got their way. That's what it is, and their cop's going to get off.
Can I also just say, because part of the question was about the community and what its role is here. I think that and it may be difficult to do this, but I think the community can help by expressing itself, right? And I also think that police institutions should, for themselves, be interested in this. But feedback is important, and I think no police institution agency really wants to have a city or a town full of people who are angry with them, right? It doesn't make them any safer. It makes
we don't.
makes policing dangerous. So I think mechanisms for feedback are important, and so the community should avail itself of every mechanism that exists. And if they don't exist, I would implore the police themselves to think about how do they increase mechanisms for feedback as it relates to people like myself in the legislature. When it comes to most things, most people aren't contacting us. They don't think to contact us until they're at a point where they're in trouble. I would encourage people to reach out and speak. I get that some police officers don't like my bill. I get that, but it's in response to the conversations and experiences I've had and shared with my constituents, right? And so what you see is when people communicate, many people don't believe this, but there is movement that happens. And so there is a way for the community to be heard. It's not instantaneous, but it does happen. And I think people need to figure out how they can participate in those things, because one way or the other, there's going to be laws made, there are going to be changes made, and you want your voice to be a part of it.
Now, I guess this is a follow-up to what Senator Winfield just mentioned. With having people get involved, people contacting the Senate, the House, and the police department. Is that the same sort of advice that you would give to the college students, especially those students at Southern, when it comes to getting involved with community police?
Well, I think that anybody who is going to spend any time in the community, particularly if they're going to live in that community for whatever amount of time, should probably get themselves involved. If you don't, the only thing that happens is the policies that the community has, or the policy that the police have, or the policy that the state has, are acted upon you without your input. I think college students really should be civically involved. Part of the college experience is to understand not only, I got my education, therefore I got my job, but what it is to be a fully participating person in our civic society. So yes, I absolutely think that college students should be involved in that way. And I actually think it's sad to me when I see college students who are not. I think they're missing part of what the experience really is.
Yeah, I agree. And when I first saw that question, I kind of related it to Yale, right? Yale will protest every corner of the city. They'll get involved in protests, which is good. The city needs help. People protesting need help. But then when it comes time for real change, Yale goes off and probably makes good money and never looks back, right? I think Southern is a unique place where I would love to see us get more officers from Southern. And I don't think people need to be in college to get it, so to speak. Like Senator Winfield said about his bill, I get it. I've been policing for 23 years, and I know it's a result of bad behavior from police. So I get that. But we need educated people to join police, probation, parole, the city, and help us. Don't just complain about the problems, be part of the solution. And I think educated college students that are already in the social justice movement don't back away from law enforcement. Go into it. If it's something you wanted to do, go into it and help that change. Help that positive change. Don't just complain about it. You know what I mean? That's what I was thinking about. I recently went back to UNH doing a master's program, and I was amazed at, you do the online and you do discussions, and I was amazed at how smart and how caring the students were. And after every class, I say, please, some of you, please apply to New Haven Police Department. We need people like you who get it. You know what I mean? So I would say that the college community should also think about these issues and where it applies to them and get involved in these jobs and take that knowledge they learned and move forward to help a city like New Haven or any city and help a police department. There's some people in the police force will say, oh, I don't want my children to be involved in this. I don't want to promote the police department. I say bullshit. Be involved in the police department. This is the best time now, right? It's an opportunity for change. It's an opportunity for us to get this right. It's an opportunity for us to actually do the community police the way I was talking about it in the beginning. And we need good people, smart people. You don't even have to be educated, but you have to be smart and you have to get it. Why are these things happening? Because something happened that wasn't right. Let's fix it. So that's how I think the college community can get involved.
I want to definitely add on to that and go along with that. I do want to applaud SCSU for just their, and Brandon for putting all these together. Very good job. And SCSU has this big stance on reform. You ride by under the bridge during COVID, it's stuff about COVID. You ride by, it's stuff about Black Lives Matter. You ride by, somebody gets it in the school. Somebody gets it that, we're fighting for social justice. So I think I did a couple of lectures at UNH also with criminal justice students, and was saying the same thing that they are the ones that are inheriting the probation office. They are inheriting the police department. They are inheriting the law. They are inheriting all of these departments that can possibly send people to prison. So having empathy and sympathy and understanding and figuring out what's going on with the individual you're working with, all these different stances. But on the college level, it's a great place to hone in on these youth who are there to make great out of their life. They're there to focus and make great out of their life. So honing on those guys and keeping them focused and going in the right direction, like what Southern is doing, and also what UNH are doing. And I see brought Jacobson, brought me in to have conversations with these criminal justice students. This is powerful. And also, like he was talking about the police officers coming into our New Haven department. That may be great because the police officers on campus definitely deal with the students different. And I think they have understanding that you're getting children coming into campus who are trying to figure themselves out. And they don't know everything because their kids coming into campus. Just thinking of your freshman class coming in. You got a bunch of kids coming in who have not lived here. The first year is so tough. I get so many calls from kids that I got to keep building back up who are just crying because they got a seat, or just they're not with their family, or it's so many things. But it's never a phone call about how the police interacted with them. Never. Right? Which means the police on campus get it. Something's going on in their training that's telling them that you're working with a bunch of babies here. And this is how we need to interact with these students. So I think it'd be a good idea for some of those guys to come over, like Jacob's police department, or maybe even going over and seeing what they're doing with all these kids on campus. that we don't see a bunch of arrests happening on campus. Granted, you don't want to lose your scholarship, or you don't want to get kicked out of school. Granted, it may not be as heinous as things going on, but all those kids, you have to have a little brush with the law at times, you know. But I do believe it must be a different conversation, be a different understanding going on also with those cops on campus working with those youngsters. So that may be something we should look into to see how officers interacting with a male or female or non-gender person on campus, and how are they interacting with them if they coming from a party drunk, and they didn't get arrested tonight. They got to camp. They got to their dorm. Those kind of things. Figuring out what are they doing on campus that they don't have a bunch of arrests. Maybe something to look at.
Thank you, everyone. This was definitely a powerful conversation. We hit a lot of strong points of that. Mental health is not just within our community, but it could be within our officers as well. So these are the conversations that we need to start having within our community, within our college campus, within our police department, within everyone around us, to be more aware and take more action into the initiatives that we are starting and the initiatives that we have to keep going, not just for short term, but for long term, because things don't happen overnight. Changes happen throughout time. And although we want change now, we have to take action to get change now. I would like to thank Officer Jacobson, Senator Gary Winfield, and Chaz from Ice to Beef to have this conversation, to show that it's not just happening on our college campus and that it's happening within our community of New Haven. So thank you all very much for joining us for this conversation. Thank you, Dr. Brooks, for hosting the conversation with me. And let's take action and move forward instead from moving backwards. Thank you all.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Love you guys.
Thank
God
you.
bless.